Hey there, welcome to Farmcraft. I bought a toy. This is a 1988 GMC C7000. It's got a drop axle and can haul up to 15 tons. And I got it for a pretty good price. I may tell you that price at some point in this video, but not right now. So I need this truck to haul stone. My driveway is a mile long and I've been paying people for years to haul it to me. With the price of everything going up, I really need to be able to do this myself. Over time, this truck's going to pay for itself. So the truck has a lot of good things going for it. 1, it runs. 2, the dump works. 3, the brakes work. That might be about it. Oh, the other thing it really has going for it is not a lot of rust. There's a little bit of surface rust right here, but the frame is in great shape. There's a little bit of rust under the dump body, but it's pretty solid. Tires aren't bad, but they're old, and a lot of them have some dry rot on them. The front tires, the tread's good, but they are old tires, and they have dry rot on them. I'm planning on having those replaced. Well, a couple of these back tires are flat, so I'm going to use these tires here to get the back where everything's holding air and put new tires on the fronts, because the front blowout when you're hauling 15 tons, not cool. So yeah, this engine really runs very well. It has 222,000 miles on it. That's the 8.2 liter Detroit diesel. For that engine, that's not a lot of miles. I can certainly go another 100, but the 8.2 Detroit is infamous. It's a low power engine. They call it the fuel pincher. It does make the truck economical to run because you can go a long distance on little fuel, but man, you're gonna go slow up hills. So problems. I think some of these belts are slipping. This power steering reservoir leaks. There's a whole rat's nest of disconnected wires here. I think that was from a plow that used to be in the front. I mean, look at these wires. It's even more fun inside. The dash, there's just wires everywhere, and who knows where they go to. It's going to be a fun troubleshooting adventure. Many of the lights don't work. There's no heat or air inside. The clutch makes a lot of noise. I think one of the bearings is going. All right, let's start this baby up. That's mounted well. Here's the mount for the drop axle. It's also nice and secure. It's got a 2-speed rear axle, so that's basically your overdrive. Speedometer doesn't work, fuel gauge doesn't work, oil pressure I think does work, battery voltage works, air pressure works, and the temperature gauge I think is stuck in that position. This light says intake heater, it's on all the time. Oh, it handles like a dream. Now, we're going to step back in time for a little bit because I bought this over near where my parents live, which is a few hours from me. And I had intended to drive it home when I bought it, but I wasn't confident I was going to make it. So I worked on it at my parents' place. All right, so my first problem is this. This is the compressor, which supplies air for the air brakes. And I think that bearing right there is failing because it's squealing like mad. And then this is the power steering fluid reservoir, which is empty. So I need to fill that. This compressor, I can't find a reliable part number on, so I got to rip this thing off of here.
How many hoses and things were feeding into that thing?
Yeah, I think it's oil lubricated and water cooled. So it's got attachments, supply and return on both of those. The hoses are all pliable and they're not cracking and oops, that's some radiator fluid right there. Need to support that up somehow. It's moving. Yep. Yeah. That's not too bad once you get above it.
You got a black hose hanging off of it.
Yeah. Pretty sure I made a mistake. This thing was squealing, and the guy told me he had tried several different belts on it, and that didn't help. And I made the rookie mistake of believing him. I thought this bearing was bad, but there is no play at all. That's the compressor that you're hearing there. It turns well. I don't think that was the problem. Actually, I think the problem is this pulley is just covered with this sticky grease. And that's probably why his belts were squealing and why it didn't sound like a belt sound. It sounded odd. Like I thought maybe there was a clutch or something behind here, but nope. I think it's just the belt. So I'm going to put this thing back on. While I have it off, though, check that out. You can see down in there the two pistons. So basically what you're looking at, it's like an engine except it's a compressor. That's the crankshaft, the caps, the connecting rods go up. You know, connecting rods are up here into the cylinders and the pistons. And there's just some one-way check valves. Intake that opens when it's coming down, and then exhaust that opens when it's going up. Since this thing's always spinning when the engine is spinning, it needs a way to turn itself off. And this is what does that. There's a little shuttle valve in here. When the pressure gets high enough, this goes over and essentially opens the intake valve all the time. So it pulls air in, but then it pushes it right back out to atmosphere. So it's not really doing anything. It's just coasting at that point. Click. Hopefully I won't come back tomorrow and find it
Empty.
empty.
Let's hope not.
See how this air cleaner looks. Yeah, it looks fine. That's the easiest part of it all. That oil looks a little thin. I wonder if diesel fuel is getting in there. So I finished changing the thin engine oil, which was overfilled. I topped off the power steering fluid and I headed home. It's typically a 3-hour drive, but it took me 4. This baby is a joy to drive. Check out these wipers. Come on, baby, you can do it. Well, I made it home. I had one rear tire blowout. Interestingly, the air pressure was varying from 70 psi to 120 psi, and I couldn't really make any sense as to why. It didn't have to do with engine RPM. The rear axle tends to slip when it's in low. It works well in high, and the truck is geared so low that I can actually just use it in high, I think. That is one of those Eaton 2-speed rear axles, and I need to learn more about it. I'm not sure what would be causing it to slip in low. So lots of problems with this truck. What do you think I paid for it? Well, for the price, I was expecting several problems, and I think I got a fair deal given the current market. I paid $6,500 for it. So what do you think? Did I get ripped off? So this is how you do the dump. Push the clutch in, engage the PTO, which is this lever here. So here we are under the truck. When I'm pulling that lever, what I'm doing is engaging a gear in this, which is the PTO. That's the transmission, that's where the main power is coming out. But it engages a gear that allows power to come into this gearbox and this shaft right here. That shaft there. Here's that shaft before engaging the PTO and with the PTO engaged. And now pulling this back will do the dump. When I pull the dump lever, what I'm pulling is on this mechanism. That's a hydraulic pump that's now being driven by the PTO, and it's just putting hydraulic oil to the main cylinder on the dump. Here is the safety mechanism so that you can lock it in an up position. When the dump goes up, this comes down because we're beyond the pivot, and those holes will end up lining up. That allows you to raise the bed and safely work underneath it. So I need a pin that's 8.5 long, 1.5 inch solid. I'm gonna have a plate on one end, and then the other end I'll put a hole through it and we can drop a pin in. So let me knock a couple of those out. And here you can see how the safety locks work. Now I'm lowering the bed. The bed falls by gravity. There's no hydraulic pressure trying to pull it down. And obviously the pins hold the bed in place and it won't go down any further. Now if that were to start coming down, those locks are going to catch it. Even if I'm under here, I'm okay. I obviously wouldn't want to get right beside the pivot point. Here's the inside of our dump bed. The swing gate works. This pin here goes all the way through. He did not have a pin for this other side that would reach all the way through. I need to make one for that. So let's do that. So for this pin, I need 1.25 inches. I don't have any, but I have this little piece of 1.5 inches, so I'm going to use this. One-thousandth over. I think that'll be good enough. So now that I got 2 pins on the top, I'm okay to open up this bottom. Watch the release right there. If you want to make a pile, you leave it like that. Now if you want to spread stone, you want it to just open a little bit. Then you put this chain in, so it'll catch the gate and not let it open all the way. So this thing's bent, and it's really a pain to put the chain in there the way it is. It looks like 3/8 steel. I don't know if this is going to be up to it. It's moving it, but it's not going on enough to make it bend where it needs to bend. Man. This is wrench abuse. It's also back abuse. Oh yeah, that's a lot better. Man. Bolt might break. I win. It's an absolute must that I get the air conditioning working. So I hooked my air conditioner to power, and it tried to spin, but didn't do much. So let me open this up and see if I can figure out what's going on with it. That would have been a little better than bending up your fan blades. Wait, I mean air conditioner. Yeah, whatever. Why you no come off? Black is our ground. This is the power in that goes through the switch. And it looks like green is one speed, yellow is the other speed. So if I just hook black to ground and then yellow or green, I should get this to spin. And that way we'll be able to see if it's the switch or not. These Bosch drill batteries make a convenient 12-volt power source. Alright, so energizing green. Oh yeah, you hear it squeak? It tried to turn, but it's just too stiff in there, so I need to get in there and lubricate that, and it'll probably work just fine. It's always a little tricky getting those brushes back in position. This motor is actually way easier than many of them, the way it's put together, because you can really get to it while you're putting that back on the commutator. Spins much easier. Let's go this way. All right, I put it back in. Now I have to figure out how to get power to it. Looking at this is just an inside you know, dome light, which I really don't need. And I took it off, followed that wire. That wire goes right down here behind the seat, and it is connected to nothing. I just need to get it to constant power supply. So I think what I want to do is actually bring it probably right through there. I'll put a grommet or something on it, and then I can bring it underneath and run it forward into the engine compartment, and I can go into this lovely mess and find some continuous power. Change my mind, I'm going to run new wire. Important to go through a grommet so you don't wear through those wires on that metal. Let's get this thing hooked up. I'm going to hook my power to the accessory connection, which will only be on when the truck is in the key on position. Okay, so the key is off. Key on. Air conditioning. Nice. I'm just working on the wiring for the rear tail lights. This light's all busted up. I would like the turn signals to work. This is a slow truck to drive, and I just don't feel right not being able to tell the drivers around me that I am turning. Now, interestingly, being a farm vehicle, I don't have to have turn signals on it. Seems like a good idea, though. That's a nice new tire on the steering axle. That's a new retread. And those tires are both good. My friend needed some stone, so at this point I decided to try hauling my first load of stone ever and spreading it. And, well, this is an example of you don't know what you don't know. I know some things to look out for. I know side camber on a road when you have your bed up is dangerous, flipping sideways. Well, I'll just let you watch. So it's easy watching the footage to see I had the dump way too high. I had way more stone left in there than I thought. I didn't know how wide to open the tailgate to spread appropriately, and it should have been wider than I had it. There's a lot going on very quickly. You're trying to drive the truck, you're trying to adjust the height of the dump bed, you're trying to watch and make sure that the stone you're spreading isn't too thin or too thick, and there's definitely going to be a learning curve on this, and I'm at the bottom of it right now. I could have dumped in the other direction so I was going down the slope, but then I would have had to stop at the bottom. This way I could start dumping and just keep going until I was empty. At least that was the idea. I should add, that was a lot scarier than it looked in the video. I mean, I didn't know what was happening. All I knew is suddenly I couldn't steer anymore, and then I'm just seeing sky and I feel movement. I really had no idea if I was about to flip or not. So I hauled my first load of stone in this beast. Well, I have mixed feelings. It actually drives very well. I had 10.5 tons in it. I wanted to start with a little on the light side to see how it did. And it steered well. It felt fairly comfortable driving it, but it could not pull a hill worth a darn. Now here's the thing. When I got to the place, my friend's house, I delivered the stone. I popped a wheelie. As I was pulling out and it was getting dark, which this thing doesn't have proper lights to be driving at night, this axle I realized was locked. I pulled out on the pavement. I could make it move a little bit, putting it in first gear and forcing it. But here is where I was trying to drive down the road, and you can see it actually wore that area flat. So I had to stop. The only solution I had is I took a ratchet strap. I went down under around both tires. I wish I had filmed it, but it was getting dark and late, and I just didn't think to. I hooked it here and here, cranked it as tight as I could. I still couldn't lift that axle up. It's supposed to lift up. I mean, it's a drop axle, but it's not working right. I'm not sure why. So what I did is, after I had the ratchet strap as tight as I could get it, I started to raise the bed a little bit. And I had the bed up like 4 inches or something, and then the axle was up enough that I could drive without dragging. And I drove home, so here it sits. That axle is locked. I'm thinking maybe that's why I felt like it had no power. Maybe that thing was dragging me the whole time, because man, it was hard on this engine. So we have more work to do. So I'm going to move the truck up to my shop, and rather than dragging that wheel the whole way, I'm going to lift that axle again using chains this time. And here you can see a typical start for this engine. It smokes a lot for a couple of minutes, but once it warms up, most of the smoke clears. Holly, what you got? You got the money? She likes it too. Yeah, Holly, I like it too. So that's where that drop axle is supposed to ride. There's an inflation bag that's supposed to push it up like that. I think it must be leaking or something. I'm checking the air brakes to make sure that they have some movement on them. Hard for me to do when I'm holding the camera, but these are service brakes only. There's no parking brakes on this axle. And I took the wheel off of the other side too. That one spins. I can turn that by hand, and I put the camera on these and hit the brakes and verified that both of these service brakes are moving. So that wheel should be able to spin right now, but it won't. I'm going to disconnect this from the brake canister so that I can freely move the brakes and ensure that they're free and fully released. Whew. I would have thought I would be able to move that a little bit. So I'm thinking maybe those brakes are stuck. It's just actuating a cam which pushes on the brake shoes, and it will not budge. I've got this big wrench for leverage. And I cannot move it either direction. So I wasn't sure if that should be moving or not, so I took the other side apart, and I can move this one. Oh no, it's already that way. Yeah. Sounds like it could use a little grease, but it should be able to move. Grease gun, I'm going to grease all these fittings and then go back to the bad side and see if I can work that free. That guy right there. She no budge. And I've been fighting with this thing for a while now. This grease fitting would not take any grease, and I tried to replace it, and it's stripped. The fitting just comes out when you try to grease it. So I'm gonna have to look at that later. Between using this wrench and trying to work this thing back and forth, and also using this big pipe wrench and just putting it directly on the pipe, I actually got it to move a little bit. And at the risk of giving myself a hernia, I'll see if I can show you. It moved a little there. And back. And the good news is the hub will spin now. So now at least I can get the drum off. I'm gonna need some bigger wrenches. Well, I can tell you it was Guten tight. That's the torque spec. Okay, that's keyed. It's quite a bearing. That's light. All right, so I can see now I did not have to split these. It's fine that I did. This is what I'm up against. This lip right here, probably a 1/4 inch right there, is hitting the edge of the brake shoe when, even though they are released, you know, it's free to spin, but it's just not enough to get it off. All right, I'm figuring this thing out. This is called the slack adjuster. What I'm looking at here is the end of a spline shaft. I need to take that snap ring off, take this washer off. Then I'm going to be able to actually remove the slack adjuster, which is going to allow that bar to spin as much as it needs to fully release the brakes. Then I should be able to take that hub off. So let's see if this works. Well, -1 snap ring. You know, the underside of this truck looks pretty rough on camera, but it's actually just surface rust. Everything's solid. I just need to clean it up. Probably power wash the whole thing so that I can really see what's going on under here. Marks so that I know how that was on there. Well, that's interesting. That's a gear mechanism. I thought that thing was going to be different. Well, if that's the case, I don't think I need to take it off. I was thinking I was going to take it off, but I can adjust it all the way back. It's going to allow me to spin this cam so that it's totally disengaged from the drums, or from the pads. All right. Here you can really kind of see how these brakes function. The shaft that I'm rotating is hooked to this here, which has a cam on it. So you can imagine if this is to rotate down like that, this cam is going to spin around and push on that, and that is the brake shoe. So that's going to push that down against the drum, and then conversely, as it rotates, the other side is going to push up on this brake shoe, and that's what applies the brakes. So from the air brake to this bar is all mechanical. So the air brakes are basically giving you a very strong rotation on this bar, which is applying the brakes against the drum. So I'm going to keep spinning that bar to disengage these brakes, and I'm going to leave the camera here so you can see that cam rotate. All right, yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, that's what we wanted. The shoes actually have quite a bit of pad left in them, and this is an old farm truck. I'm not going to replace those pads, but I am going to take all this apart and clean everything up. Yeah, this thing is still super hard to move. At this point, it should be easy to move, so I need to fix that. So I took the other side apart as well, and I've got it where I can move it very easily just by hand. This side, not so much. I can move it. But it is work. I think it's this joint right here. I'm able to grease the far bearing and grease squeezed out. This is the only other thing that could be holding it. If you look at this one, it's just a solid piece of metal with a grease fitting. This one is split, and that's a plastic bushing there. So I don't know why it's different. Maybe somebody replaced that at some point, or maybe they replaced this one. But either way, I'm gonna take that apart and see if I can't get that shaft polished. There I go again, polishing my shaft. I'm gonna have to name this truck Johnson. Johnson's dropping its load. Oh boy. Yeah, I need to get that apart, see if I can polish up the shaft, get some grease in there, and get that thing so it's moving freely. And this is what really froze my brakes up. Right there is where that plastic bushing was, and it's totally rust jacked. It's bigger there. The snap ring won't even go over that area. So all that junk needs to come off of there, and I need to be able to grease it. It's tempting to clean the whole thing up, but there's no point. This is just going to be exposed and rust again. I'm just going to clean up the two spots where I need a good clean surface using some emery cloth. I think that's going to do it. Well, this really kind of goes to show you how important grease fittings can be. I think this grease fitting failed because it was just in this plastic. I'm not sure what it is. It's real hard and tough, but it's not going to hold the pressure from a grease gun. So this hadn't seen grease in a long time. Obviously, if this joint was greased, it never would have rusted. Instead, it ran dry and then started rust jacking and locked up my brakes. It was like this. I don't know what that cutout is for. Maybe that is the intention, but I'm going to just put a grease fitting there. It'll be through the metal. Time to get my greasings. That's how it's supposed to move. brakes push on this lever over here, that happens. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get comments that I should be replacing these pads, and you know, if this was a daily driver truck, absolutely I would do that. But it's not. This is a farm truck. I'm going to be taking this thing on the road maybe 10 times a year. These brakes are going to work, and they're going to work for a long time. You ever wonder why they use air brakes on big trucks? Probably not, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Cars use a hydraulic system. It's using oil, which is relatively not compressible. You push on the pedal, you're pushing a piston that is generating pressure in an oil system, and that oil then applies the brakes to discs or drums. They also use some boost pumps and things to try to assist you and make that easier. But that system's just not going to work on this vehicle. This vehicle gross weight is 46,000 pounds. You know, cars are like 4,000 pounds. So you're talking about more than an order of magnitude more energy that you're trying to stop. With that system, you're not going to generate enough force and enough travel to apply the brakes on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different brakes that is going to be able to stop that vehicle. So you need to use the engine to assist you. And what we do here is we compress air with the engine and an air compressor. We store it in air tank reservoirs, and then we use that to apply the brakes. You might wonder why they don't use oil like they do in a car. Well, I would argue, why don't cars use air like they do in a truck? Now, there are some disadvantages, but air is limitless. You're never going to run out of air. You can have a small leak, and it's not going to matter as long as it's not too big of a leak to overwhelm the compressor. Your brakes are still going to work. You can fix the air leak later. If you have an oil reservoir and you have a leak, well, you're losing your oil. And once you're out of oil, you no longer have brakes. So in a lot of ways, this system is more robust and more reliable than what's in a car. Getting ready to put this hub back together. There's one bearing that I don't have out, and that's because I'd have to take this seal out, and then I have to replace the seal. Again, farm truck. I'm just going to grease the bearing like it is and put this back together. You really want to get that grease down in there, so I'm just going to keep doing this and pushing it in until it squeezes out the other side of the bearing. A little brake clean before we put that back together. We'll get that other bearing in there and we can put the axle nuts back on. Yep. So I can see it squeezing through right there. That's what you want, and you know you got it all through. You noticed ever since COVID, gloves got crazy expensive. Well, these are nice gloves. I don't want to throw them away just for that little use, so put your air compressor in there. There you go. Unfortunately, I had technical difficulties and didn't get the footage of installing the axle nuts. Alright, the axle spins again. At least I can use the truck. Need to adjust the brakes first, though. Okay. So basically you want about an inch of travel before the brakes start being applied. Now I just have to do the other side. Whew, that's a lot faster. So I'm starting to think maybe I didn't get that good of a deal. I wasn't expecting to have to do so much work back here. Honestly, with this truck and the engine that it has, I was thinking, you know, I buy the truck, it's a solid truck, and I put a new engine in it. You know, you can get like a Cat 3208 for $2,500 with a transmission maybe for $3,000. I throw that in there, and then I've got a good solid truck with good power that can haul 15 tons for around 10 grand. But I'm spending an awful lot of time on these, although it's not costing a horrible amount of money yet. So with that axle unlocked, at least I can now use the truck. I still have a lot to address on this truck. I was hoping in one video I'd be able to get it all ready to go for hauling 15 tons of stone, but I need to address that drop axle. I need to still address the power steering. There's many other things that I need to work on. Look for that in a future video, including I'm going to show you the best way to spread stone in 2 tracks. You can see how my driveway has 2 tracks the entire length of it. When a drive is well established and you're not driving on the center of it, grass ends up growing there and you get a high spot there, which is good for drainage. But when you put stone down, you don't actually want it going in the center because it'll just keep getting higher in the center and you end up scraping the bottom of cars and it's not doing anything for you. You want to spread it where the wheels are. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. Did you guys notice that I'm now shooting everything in 4K? 4K videos from here on out. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.